Hello everyone, welcome, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my experiences and some of the conversations I'm having with organizations. And we are heading into a recession, something that we've never experienced in our lifetimes. So let's just do a quick recap then. So last time we talked about disruption and the new skills and behaviors that were critical. And one of the key skills which we measured, what we discussed last time, was planning skills. These are going to be critical as we go forward and obviously measure what the customer is going to do. And I'm going to reinforce those points in spades a little bit later on. But today, I'd like to talk about driving performance and excellence and helping you prepare the groundwork. I've got some fairly thought-provoking slides a little bit later on, which will help you get you thinking. But we've got to drive the pipeline, and you've got to win your share of what's available. And the noise that we're hearing is that pie is getting smaller. That means it's going to be very competitive. It means and also potentially new entrants. So there's a lot of challenges because in the past, the economy has grown, organizations are buying from somebody, and as long as you do a pretty good job, you can fulfill those needs. Now you're going to have to deliver excellence. You're going to have to adapt. You're going to have to change. You're going to have to do things that you've never really done as effectively as before. And you're going to hear me use two words a lot today: efficiency and effectiveness. And there's one I'm going to use much more than the other. So let's kick off. So let's just quickly, let's understand this major disruption. There is pressure to find customers. Sellers are under pressure. Managers and CEOs and company owners are saying, come on, I need more, up the activity level. I need to find business because you're not generating the cash to pay the bills. You're trying to bring customer relationships are under pressure. It's difficult to do all these things necessary on the Zoom. No longer can we have this face-to-face meetings. There's a lot of not knee-jerk reactions going on. And it's understandable. We've got presses to fill, we've got capacity to fill. Everybody's chasing every opportunity. Our order takers, which obviously we don't want them to be order takers, are not qualifying, and there's a lot of wasted time on sales activity that isn't going nowhere. So I'd like to sort of suggest to you that as understandable these things are, and as we all do some of these things ourselves, it isn't the solution. What is the solution is to develop a great sales culture. So let's just step back for one moment. I'm very proud of what we've done in the Olympics and what GB has done. And I think we can learn a lot. And I want to talk to you about how we increase sales through the aggregation of marginal improvements and sort of initially look at it from a competitive sport positioning. Hopefully you may have heard of Sir David Brailsford. I'm sure you have. Back in Mexico Olympics, we won one gold medal, just one medal in sport. In 2012, we won 50% of all the medals for cycling. And not only that, we also won sports and triathlon gold medals and silver medals. And in 2012, we won the very first ever Tour de France. But we also won it in 2013, 14, 15, 17, and 18. So we've done certain things pretty well in this sport. And the person at the top of the chain, probably the master coach, is a guy called Sir David Brailsford. And Brailsford coined the phrase, aggregation of marginal improvements. And if you break everything down involved in riding a bike and improved it by 1%, there is a significant increase when you put all those components together. And this philosophy we need to bring into sales. We need to deliver sales excellence, sales operational, and see sales as a process and not a problem. So let me explain. So first of all then, let's have a look at marginal improvements for sales. On the first side, first thing we need to do is that our primary aim is to maximize the sales a year. And if we're at 70% demand and we're running well below capacity, that will create all sorts of problems. But there's four variables. And the one thing we can do, we can either go for bigger contracts, or we can go for more contracts. And that's not so easy, because not every contract do we go for, do we get the business. We have to quote for the business first. So one of the first things we've got to do is we've got to get our quotes, and out of those quotes, we win contracts. But is that enough? No, we have to split quotes down, because before we can get a quote, we have to get an approach. We have to approach organizations. And before we do any approaches, we've got to have some activity. So we've got to drive activity. We've got to then make sure we approach the right organizations. We've got to then convert those quotes into contracts. And if we can maximize those contracts, if we can get the balance right, we can increase our share of the business and start to recover our revenue streams and profit margins. However, it's not that easy. Let me say what underpins all of this is skills. And previously, because we haven't had to invest in behaviors or skills, because business was coming, our share of the business was coming already, now this is the time when we've got to up our game. And I want to make the point that there's two things that we need to focus in on. First of all is the quantity of our activity. And if you bear with me, I think the next one is even more important. We've got to focus on the quality of our activity. And traditionally, a lot of organizations focus on quantity. Now it's time to focus on quality. And let me try and explain to you why. And let me explain how the journey of a seller sort of operates, and how over time, and many of you in the audience will instinctively know what I'm talking about. But we now need to put the processes in and the coaching in to ensure that it happens. Let me explain. When you first start off in sales, the first thing that you tend to do is you have lots of energy. I'm really thrusting, and in days gone by, we used to go door knocking, but nowadays we get onto our navigator, we go onto our Marketo, we go work with our marketing department, we do lots of prospecting, and we use social media to drive our awareness and our coverage. And the idea is that once we do that, we end up with some leads. And when we get leads and we start to, through our territory research and our segmentation, we get a bit of a nose for the business. When I talk about nose for the business, when you're new to sales, you contact 100 companies and only 10 of them want to talk to you. But if you do really good territory research and segmentation, when you approach 100 companies, 50 want to talk to you. That's a really important thing. But when you get to talk to these organizations and finally the approaches get you through the door, the important thing is, are we really good at creating the needs? Are we able to talk their language? And once we've created the needs with the organization, the salesperson needs to be able to demonstrate through testimonials and references that they can fulfill those needs. But the important point is, because once you've done that, guess what? The customer says, oh, do you mind quoting for us? And then we start to see some improvement. So then we start to put our quotes, but then there are some people who win more quotes than others. And the reason why people win more quotes than the average, in fact, the best win twice as much as the average, is because they instinctively understand the concept of qualification. They instinctively know it's not worth spending a lot of time on deals that they can't win. They're able to distinguish between those deals and contracts and bids that they can win and ones which are not winnable. And not only that, the reason why they know that is because they understand this concept of commitments. They understand the concept that customers commit when they're serious. And when they're not serious, they don't commit. And the problem is a lot of sellers don't get commitments from customers because they don't know how to do it. So they go into meetings or go into Zoom calls and they come away thinking they've had a really good meeting, and then you actually analyze it. And they've got a whole ton of work. They've got to do proposals, quotes, samples, and this, that, and the other. And you say, well, what's the customer doing? Well, they're doing nothing. Well, guess what? I bet they only win 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 of their bids. And also, because they understand politics and relationships, they have a focus on clearly being much sharper than the other people. So these people have this ability to convert the quotes into contracts a lot better than the average. So think about this. If we approach the right organizations and we're really good at creating the right needs within those organizations, prove we can do that. And then, when we put the quotes in there, because we've got commitments and because we've qualified it's worth all the effort and we plan effectively, and guess what we start to do is that we end up focusing on better quality opportunities. We've already qualified out the poor sales. And because we've been building up the needs, because we've qualified out of the bad deals, we are able to believe in our price. We've built up our balance of power. We've built in our friends and we've built up the politics within the account. And these critical skills are incredibly important. And I want to make the point, we can spend a lot of time on quantity, or we can develop the quality. And this is where I want to focus in on. So let me just show you the impacts that this might have. So don't get too hung up about the specific numbers, but focus on the message. So on the one hand, we can make 50 calls a week, or a seller can make 50 calls a week. And out of those calls, they might get 1 in 10 of those approaches might lead to a quote. And out of 1 in 5 of those quotes lead to contracts. And just for argument's sake, the contract's worth £20,000. That all adds up to 960,000. So they end up with 240 quotes. They end up with 48 contracts, and 48 contracts times 20 is £960,000 a year. Now, if we just take on board what I've just been talking about, let's suppose we're not going to focus on the quantity because the market's not getting any bigger. You haven't got any more resources, and you certainly haven't got any bigger marketing budgets. So let's just, for the moment, let's just focus not on activity, although remember, I do believe in activity. You can be the best batsman in the world, but if you spend all the time in the pavilion, you ain't going to score runs. So activity is important. But let's focus on quality. Let's suppose, because of our territory research, because of our segmentation, because of our value proposition, and because we've got a nose for the business, we are targeting the right organizations. So we, in other words, we kiss less frogs. And we move their quotes to approaches from 1 in 10 to 1 in 8. Just supposing, and these are not ambitious, that because we are qualifying out of the bad deals, because we're more effective at need creation, because we understand qualification and commitments, and particularly qualification and commitments, we improve our win rates. Instead of winning 1 in 5, we win 1 in 4. And because we build up the power and our balance of power and our politics and our salesmanship, we're able to improve our margins and prices and go for slightly bigger deals. And these are marginal improvements of 5%. Guess what? The difference is dramatic, 64%. We go from 960, and all we've done is start to manage the process. We've started to focus on the skills and behaviors. We're developing the right behaviors, and we're managing it like a manufacturing process. And it's absolutely important that you drive, because if you want to get from 30% to 90% and not only survive but succeed, you really need to understand this impact and start to become experts in sales process management in the same way that you're experts in manufacturing. I think it was actually quite a nice time to open up and ask some questions.
Okay, a few questions, Mike. I mean, we talk about this being a recession, and people of a certain age like myself have found the recession period roughly every 8 years. We move back into that sort of cycle, but this is majorly different, isn't it? This is a seismic drop in demand, global drop in demand. Do you see the challenges being the same? Do you see the processes working in the same way as in what we might call a traditional recession? No, I think
what we're getting is a paradigm shift. We're seeing, as we used to see in the 90s, we called it paradigm shifts. We then called it thriving on chaos, and now we call it vectors of disruption. They're all very, very similar. things can happen very quickly and have happened quickly in the past. I remember the lovely story of when the Swiss watch company took to a Japanese show this little digital watch, and the Swiss said, "Oh, this isn't really this isn't what we do. This isn't going to take over." Within 4 years, 400,000 jobs were lost in the watch industry, and they lost 70% of market share just because of a little digital watch which went to a show. Now, if that can happen with just a technology change, to be fair, what came back is the Swiss won theirs because they built quality, they built brand, they built the Swatch watch. But do not underestimate impact of change. And so what's happening here with the demand is a major issue. And so you can't wait for the economy to grow or things to just recover. It's not going to recover in exactly the same way, and it requires new business models, new thought processes, and new excellences and new skills to adapt. And it's not about, oh, well, we'll just throw more money at the manufacturing process. We actually we've got to develop those relationships and collaborations with organizations that serve your customers.
Absolutely. And I think last week, Sean Smith from Smithers mentioned the collaborations as being something that he foresees as a great opportunity for businesses to move forward. Rather than invest in some new technology, you're partnering with partner organizations, other printers, other suppliers, allows a business to scale. So how does the salesperson of a business quantify those opportunities rather than pursuing the dead ends, I guess, really? How do you quantify that?
Okay, so that's a very good point. Let me just restate some of the things that we said last time. Before I do that, if I may, just it's very sensitive. Okay, if I may, just what I'd like to do is just leave you with a formula. We can focus on efficiency and we can focus on effectiveness. And at the end of the day, whether it be the salesperson or whether it be the entity, the primary objective, we've got to improve effective selling hours. This is where automation comes in. This is where the tools, this is making sure that you're using the technology, the marketing, the whole aspect is, we've got two aspects. There's the time we spend looking after the customer and fulfilling their requirements, and then there's the time we're spending selling on it. And I've unfortunately spent too many organizations are spending too much time, if you like, looking busy, but in actual fact, they're not investing time walking the corridors and building up the needs and developing their accounts and planning. And as a consequence of that, you need to keep an eye on how much time you spend selling and how much you're spending on activities which really are not going to generate revenue. You really need to really understand your win rates and your conversion rates from all the bids and quotes that you're doing. And also you need to know how long it's taking to get these contracts. And you also need to know what your average values are, because it's only from getting a grip of this that you can do it. And I often say that as we go through this, these are the four things that will make a big difference. Selling hours, velocity, hit rates, and transactions. That's the increase. You've got to hit those things really well. And it's not about just doing the right things. It's doing things right. It's about doing the right things. And this is where you've got to think outside the square. Think about the outcome, not just the process. And this is the important point as well. You should be able to see it, but is it showing closed loop process? Sorry, I've got to, no. Let me just take that down. Yeah, oops. That should rotate round, but it says closed loop process. And the important thing about the closed loop process is, I make this strong plea to you all. What you measure can be improved. What you inspect gets done. And if you're not measuring something, it means you're not managing it, which means that it's you're leaving everything to chance. And this is the time when you really got to get a grip of everything. So So let me just go on to people development, which I think is going to answer, Darren, the questions that you point. We did say last time, planning skills, is the number one, skill. And we also said you've got to see the world through your customers and understand the technology and how your processes and skills and value can have an impact on your customer, and even more importantly, on helping them win customers. Clearly, we talked about salesmanship. It is important, to understand relationships and politics. We often say there are only two reasons why you lose a bid. One is, because you were outsold, and the second one is you were never going to win it. And the reason why you were outsold is because you didn't play the politics, and the reason why you were never going to win it was because of the politics. So really understanding relationships and politics is critical. And as I said, if ever a time was required, and anybody who is, which I know in lean manufacturing and in the processes, you are experts at root cause analysis. You're also experts at problem solving. You're also experts in lean manufacturing. I can't emphasize, start applying those skills to helping yourself plan to create, win, and develop accounts. And also with an attitude of mind, which I'm going to get into. Oops, there's something slightly wrong here. In terms of, with an attitude of mind, plan to win and plan to lose quickly. So those are the really important skills for today in selling and replicate what the best are doing. Let me just explain something which
Mike, can I just ask you a question? Sorry, just sort of links into that, if you don't mind. So, I mean, your mantra, because a lot of companies here will feel like they're practicing this particular process, but your mantra really is renew the focus and renew the discipline of the focus. Pull this back in, rein it in, because incremental marginal gains is the way forward. So you don't see, this is a question here, you don't see a sort of a booster bomb solution. It's back to basics and qualification and marginal gains as the way forward as you see it, yeah?
Yeah, I think it is. I think the important point is to accelerate the skills and behaviors of your people so they replicate what the best do. It's about driving the productivity, driving the velocities, driving the win rates. There is no secret bullet, but unless it's about where you are now. You have to win a bigger slice of the share, and you have to very, very carefully work out which are the winnable ones, and then plan to win them, and win the account, and win the contracts, and identify which ones you're not going to win, so you don't waste a lot of time. At the same time, delivering an excellent service and fulfilling the expectations of your customer.
Just a cut, sorry, Mike, a couple of more questions. I mean, would you suggest, I mean, some companies are setting up, control rooms because of the importance of this. Would you suggest the team and they get together in a sort of control room situation and just go through the qualification process because it is so important? Or, there'll be skills and knowledge, but to share that knowledge, would you say that was a sort of a step forward for teams or individuals to get together and just throw ideas around the qualification process together as part of this process?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think there are, as I'm going to explain in a moment, some tools out there which will help you plan, help you understand the gaps in your knowledge, and help you identify the work that's required to win, and so you can fight to win the contracts, or you're going to lose. And I'll share the concepts. I want to, the best, and some of the business owners and some of the people I know in this audience will get what I'm saying intuitively. The problem is ensuring that the whole organization is speaking the same language, has the same culture, same planning skills. They take a while to evolve, but if you don't do it now, this is the time to accelerate that skills up and those planning skills, if ever there was a time. And I'll explain why in the next few slides. Anything else? Yeah.
Well, just one more question, because I think it's around this. I mean, a big differentiator at the moment is, as you've highlighted, is understanding your customers' real issues and understanding their psychology. You know, back to having some empathy. But is it right that you, when you're talking to your customers, you actually talk to them about your process of qualification? I mean, is it a positive to be saying, look, we want a collaborative win, so we're adopting this approach? Is that a positive step to take with your customers, to talk to them about why you're doing things and why you want the information, which is going to help you win that? I mean, is it best to work with them and tell them what you're doing and be transparent on that?
Yeah, I think it is. I think there's something to consider though. We often suggest that there's a 4-point meeting model. And the first one is we're counsellors, so we want to understand their needs. So we see the world through their needs first. In other words, we're counsellors. Once we've understood their needs, one of the key skills is we want to understand how we can fulfill those needs. So we're the storytellers, with the, providing them with the evidence and references that we can fulfill those needs. And I often refer to that as the velvet glove. But the third element is that once there's a transition from looking after the customer's money and looking after and showing them how we can fulfill those needs through how work we do with other companies, to sort of saying, well, now I've got to look after my money. I've got to look after my company's money, and that's where qualification comes in. Qualification is about sort of an attitude of mind. I'm desperately keen to help you, Mr. Customer, but it's got to be good for both of us. And once we've qualified it, and there's good ways of transitioning, do you mind? There's a few practical things that we need to discuss, and then I would use my SCOTSMAN tool and say, just confirm, do we have a good solution for you, and just tell me, who else are you looking for, and where are you in your process, and when I'm starting to look at the criteria and say, do you value then the investments and our service levels and what have you? Tell me, can we agree a timetable leading up to the decision? Tell me, how are you pushing a budget through your organisation, and can you introduce me to your CFO so I can talk about how we can finance the need there, and have I established that there's a compelling need? In other words, we can then start to use the SCOTSMAN, and once we've done the qualification, then we can agree, okay, so let's agree a timetable leading up to implementation, or let's agree a number of commitments leading up to us doing the quote. But the thing is, you start off thinking that process, and things happen in different ways, but the end point is the planning process starts at 100% the other way around. We start with the outcome, but we're not going to get any commitments until we've created the needs, shown that we can do it, and it's qualified. And so, as I'm going to explain in a moment, you need to train people to replicate and do the same as the best. But what you just said, I think, is a very good thing, and many people do. Because why not? These are the practical things that we need to discuss before you waste time and we waste time. It's having an adult conversation.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah.
So just taking that, following that through, there's two things going on. There's the planning skill, and then there's what Marcus said is the attitude of mind. The attitude of mind is that if we've got 5 million salespeople, B2B in the US and the UK, and they're only winning 3 out of 10 deals, that means 3.5 million of them each year are spending the whole year losing, which is not really good. That's a heck of a lot of wasted time. And that's all the bid teams, all the pricing departments, all the managers, all the samples that are being done, everything's been wasted. So the first thing you need is an attitude of mind. You then need a tool. You need a tool that helps you plan, identifies what work is okay, where your gaps in your knowledge and what questions need to be asked. And when you get an answer to a question that you don't ask, we've got highlights and we've got a problem here. And if we don't, and the only way we can convince ourselves that we've overcome the problem is we've got commitments from the customer. And what does that mean then? So I talked about replicating what the best do intuitively. So they use that strict criteria, that's just a quick summary of there, but of deciding where they're going to invest their time. They have an attitude in mind which says they refuse to bid on unwinnable deals. There's just not enough time to focus on that. What they do then is they spend more of that time on the winnable. And as I said earlier, there is, you know, in a competitive world in sport, you know, you can get a silver medal, you can get a bronze medal, you can get a personal best. I'm afraid in sales, coming second is just the first of the losers. There is no second place. It doesn't pay the bills. And so don't come second or third, come last or first. And focus the time on making sure you don't come second, you come first. That's what they do. And secondly, finally, they invest time on new opportunities. Because the idea of having, they create a luxury of choice. Nobody qualifies when they're hungry. What they do, these people create luxury of choice. And the reason why they create luxury of choice is because they know there's deals that they can win and deals they're not going to win. And so they create luxury of choice to throw out the bad ones and they can focus on the good ones. And what does that mean? Well, if you win 3 out of 10 versus 7 out of 10, or 7 out of 10 versus 3 out of 10, you double your selling time. Because you're better at planning, you have effective win strategies. And if you do both of those two things, you improve productivity. And if you improve productivity, effective win strategies, and double the selling time, as a business, you're in control and you can improve your forecasting, which is important to your manufacturing processes. So, however, that's only one part of it. The other part of it, which I think Marcus was alluding to, is to double the power of qualification, you need to understand the concepts of commitments. From a performance management point of view, we're often said, well, how do we how do we measure the quality of our activity? How do we embed this into our organizations? Well, commitments is the answer. When you understand the concept of commitments, they are physical actions that drive the bid or the process or the activity or the account. In other words, nothing gets done without the customer doing work. It also means it becomes much more scientific and less ambiguity. Do we have a good meeting? And everybody has a different view of what good is. Whereas in sales, it's very simple. Did the customer commit or not commit to what is the practical next steps in the selling process? It also provides you with a continuous qualification, because qualification isn't a one-off process, it's a continuous process. And it provides data sets and the ability to close loop where you are within the account or within the bid. And finally then, what does that mean from behaviors? I think a lovely way to try and get, when I talk about rewiring the brains and changing behaviors, is John F. Kennedy's inaugural speech. He says, don't think what the country's going to do for you, but what are you going to do for the country? And that's the big change that salespeople need to think about. The best thing, what do I want this customer to do for me to convince me is worth all the effort? They also understand the sale as a whole. So they see it as so they know the customer is looking for the benefits. They then educate themselves on the solution. They then understand the price and the criteria. Then we go into that horrible period where the bids are closed, and then it's down to price, emotion, and politics. But because they've done all the work and all the planning and played all the politics, they're in a pretty good spot. The companies need to replicate what good looks like. I strongly encourage you to start thinking about a common language so that you get rid of ambiguity. It becomes much more scientific, with an attitude to plan to win or lose quickly. So in other words, if you wanted to try and improve the mathematics and the sales increase frameworks, the formula makes a big point of improving effective selling hours, improve your hit rates, improve the size of your contracts. And SCOTSMAN and qualification tools and this robust thought process will determine, will they act and will they act now? Unfortunately, you can both get great scores, if you like, in that particular area, but the only thing that really counts, the true quality of the account, the true quality of an opportunity, is commitments. Commitments tells you how serious they are towards you and your company. Will they act with you? You need to answer all those 3 questions. And finally then, just to summarize these points, focus, if you're going to, as you move forward, focus on the science and granularity. It is no question that the quality of your skills and behaviors will improve your leads and conversions. The quality of your sales leadership and sales management and processes and sales process management will help you win more deals and improve the profitability of the company. But key then is to focus on operational effectiveness, not just about operational efficiency, as I'll demonstrate in a moment, and focus on the customer. You'll know when you're going to win a deal. You can feel it. The customer's giving you access. They're giving you data. They're doing lots of things. You know, the conversations, and the whole process is train your people so that they focus on not what they're going to do for the customer, but what they want the customer to do for them to progress the sale. Inspect what the customer is doing. Will give you the true quality of where you are with the account and with the customer. And then finally, then let me just make this point. The theme of this is selling is not a problem, it's a process. The theme is focus on outcomes, which is clearly focusing on the customer, and clearly the focus on being effective, not about being efficient. And culturally, the industry is very efficient because of lean manufacturing and everything else, which is great, but it needs to be effective and adapt and change. And you really need to make your selling organization effective. Let me explain what happens. If you're ineffective and inefficient, and we're seeing this with organizations and certain markets at the moment, they're just dying, and they're dying really quickly. And even the ones that are efficient, but because they're ineffective, they're just dying slowly, but this is now being accelerated. The key to what I'm trying to encourage you to think about is by managing performance and managing skills against those important KPIs will help you survive. Because you can be a little bit efficient, and you're not going to be absolutely at the peak until you've got all the people skills at the right level. You're not going until you've got all the tools, until you've done all the segmentation and getting the things. But the most important, if you're effective, you qualify, you get the commitments, you focus on doing the right things, you can at least survive and provide the groundwork and the pillars for excellence to succeed. Open to questions.
Mike, yeah, I have just a question coming in really, and you work with a lot of organisations, and Paul Scherfer makes the point about a lot of large procurement process doesn't necessarily allow this. Now, you work with organisations who are trying to sell through to procurement. Joe Francis makes the point, good advice. Don't try and go for the unwinnable. What's your sort of thoughts around? Because there is a thought that in this environment, more companies will go the procurement route to try and drive down costs. So how does this fit in with this particular process, do you think, from your experience and knowledge?
Okay, so it's very, very challenging. So this is the problem between a recognized need and where the buyer knows exactly what they want and will then go and search for a price. And that particular, if you're in that particular business model, then you really have to be really, really efficient and really focus on price and focus on delivery. And you need, and there will always be somebody who's got bigger buying power, who can buy the papers, buy the stocks, buy the print, and there are print factories, doing nothing but that type of work. And so you either need to be collaborate with these organizations and work with them because they have the ability to win those business. So in other words, you are collaborating with an organization who's going to do those, do all the wasting and the bidding for that business. So your job is to be the strategic relationship in that organization. However, not everybody buys on price. And so there are people buy on value, or they want customization. And so you've got to decide what market. That goes back to your segmentation, what your value proposition, and where you want to play. And that will be, different organizations will have different strengths. But you've got to certainly know what your foghorn message is, and you've got to know who you are and what your values are. and you've got to find customers who are prepared to who also want the same things. You've got to reflect the market. There's always somebody. I mean, I always say, if the biggest was the most important, there'll only be 4 accountancy firms in the country. If it was something else, why were all these big regional accountancy firms, or why are there all these different accounts? Fortunately there are businesses to suit every shape and size. However, if we go for bigger contracts, sometimes the best way is to collaborate with organizations, without doubt. And there will be as the market will go down for print in some areas, there is one thing for certain, is there will be companies who are shedding heads, doing away with offices, who will be wanting to outsource some of their services because they don't want the headcount in their organization, and that's an opportunity for you to provide those services in print and communications for those organizations.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, thank you.
There's some good practice chat going on, Mike, while you're talking around triage processes. I hope he doesn't mind me telling everyone the company name. It's Proto in Northampton, who talk about evaluating each inquiry up front and having a couple of quick pricing tools they use to qualify how they want to. Just a question that's come in at the very end there from Matthew. The principle of lean is to understand what adds value for the customer, but that's more difficult to do than people assume. Any tips on how to understand what adds value for your customers?
Okay, so the knee-jerk reaction when somebody rings in with an inquiry is to start qualifying it. In other words, they start to and it's a natural. You respond by what's the size, what's the quantities, and what's the timescales or whatever. I often try and encourage people to why not ask a simple question? Why is that important to you? And what I'm really getting to the point is, why now? In other words, let's start off with the need creation process. Get the customer to talk to you about what it is they're wanting, why they're wanting it, because it creates an opportunity to reshape their thinking. Not only that, you understand the context. They understand the context. You have a much better emotional relationship between the requirement and the need. And when you then do your quote, it certainly stands out that it's not, that not only are you, responding, because obviously you will get round to qualification, because we already said that we're going to get into the SCOTSMAN, if you like. We're going to look at the solution. We're going to look at budgets. We're going to look at authorization. We're going to look at timescales. We're going to do that. But why don't we just pause a moment and just spend a little bit of time building up the needs? And in the process of doing that, we'll understand both the business needs and the personal needs, and we'll suddenly learn a lot more about whether or not this is an opportunity you can win or not win, and you can build a little rapport. So that's one thing I would say. That now, in terms of we already said that the buying process, people don't like to be sold to. They are not engaging with sellers. And so the primary objective is that to work with your accounts, start to see the world, the situation, be thought leaders in the areas of your expertise, and engage earlier in the process, because there's less competition early on. If they've already done the work, they're coming to you to get the best price, and they're just bidding. I can bet you bottom dollar that you'll be lucky if you win one in 10 deals. And if you only win 1 in 10 deals, and it costs you £15,000, and or £5,000 for every big bid that you do, and you only win 10, it's cost you 50,000, and I bet there's not enough margin in the one deal that you win. So is that what you should be doing? I don't know. But at least if you're measuring it and you're planning for it, and you have a process that is can deal with it, and it doesn't cost you a lot, then that's fine. But if it's costing you time and money, then I really be very careful not to waste your time on those activities. Don't be busy fools.
Lovely, thanks, Mike. As I say, we've had some useful cross chat, but I don't think there's any more questions. I don't think I've missed anything this week. Just to close then, as we're getting close to the 2 o'clock mark, next week we'll be looking at culture change, which is going to naturally accompany this disruption. It's something which has been raised 2 or 3 times during these webinar sessions. So we're going to have a look at that as a tangible thing in more detail next week. Following that, the session after is the last part of these 3 interactive sales sessions. So hopefully you'll join us for that. And we'll also be looking a little more at the Sales Academy during that session. It's a programme of ongoing study. So for anyone who's hooked into these webinars, it's 100 units of learning across 6 core programmes. So we'll be looking at that a little bit more the week after next. Just to close, for those who missed the sort of preamble at the beginning, there's a marginal gain paper that will come out to you tomorrow with the webinar recording. I think we did put up Mike's slides last time, so we'll have a look at doing that. I'm getting a nod from my counterpart. So yeah, if anyone was making notes, they want to have some accompanying material, we'll get that sent out to you tomorrow. I'm just looking, we've had whether it's a late comment or a late question. No, I think we're good to go. So thank you for your attendance today, and hopefully we'll catch you next week. Thank you.
Bye everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.